Morning. Morning. This meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority will come to order, and we'll start by asking the Secretary to call the roll. Does this work? All right.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
I was not going to say the voice of God. That was too presumptuous, but I understand. Okay, good morning. This meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority will come to order, and I'd like the Secretary to please call the roll. And there may be an unfamiliar name as we go through that.
Vice Chair Richards.
Here.
You sure?
Am I here, Ellen? I'm not sure.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Here.
Mr. Umberg.
Here.
Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Ms. Schenk. Here. Ms. Perez-Estelano. Mr. Henning.
Here.
Chairman Richard.
Here. I'll ask Mr. Umberg to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All rise. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we proceed, we have been pleased that the Speaker of the Assembly has made an appointment to this body, and that's Mr. Patrick Henning, Sr., I guess we have to say. And Mr. Henning comes to us with a long and distinguished career in both in public service and in the private sector. And Pat, welcome. Would you like to say a few words?
Honored to be here.
Okay, well, we'll beat that out of you. You'll be saying words before too long if you're honest. Thank you very much. All right, we will begin with public comment, and as we always do, we look first to make sure that we have give our elected officials an opportunity to speak first. And I don't. Leanne, you didn't bring Supervisor Perea? We'll start with Leanne Eager, followed by Diana Lacombe, and followed by Paul Guerrero. Good morning, Ms. Eager.
Mr. Richards, I wasn't in charge of Supervisor Perea today, so I don't know where he is. But I'm Leanne Eager, President and CEO of the Economic Development Corporation serving Fresno County. And as I'm sure all of you know, things are hopping in Fresno. We have been working 24/7 with those businesses along that alignment, finding them places to move. It's been successful so far. We've gotten over a few of those difficult humps, and I think we have a good team in place. For those of you wondering out here, yes, we do have a contract, and we're putting together a team. And this is really something I wanted to address to those folks who are in the audience who's outside of the Fresno limits here in Madera, also in Kings County, that one of the things that we have certainly learned in the last 60 days is the preparation that we did for the last 3 years has been invaluable for those of us here who are working on this project. So if you're in Madera County, if you're in Kings County, if you're in Kern County, I just suggest that you start preparing for this. And if I can help in any way, coming to your communities, talking to you about what we had done in the last 3 years to prepare for this coming through our community, I'm open to do so. One of the really important things is we make sure that we met with all those folks along the alignment. And we've been keeping track of sites that are available for them to move to. So on our website, we have about 150 sites that are available. So when we speak to a client, we have some place to go take them. We've been putting together a team slowly but surely. I think you probably all know before the last 2 weeks, the team has been me. But we've been adding folks, and so we're ready to go. I also want to thank the authority, Rachel. I know we've met with her about 500 times, I'm not sure, but in ensuring that we're doing what we should be doing, and also with Diana and her team. When we have an issue and we call them, they're there on the spot to make sure that we can work through that. So things are really moving along in Fresno, and we look forward to the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eager. We appreciate the work you're doing there. Good morning, Ms. Lacombe.
Good morning. I'm Diana Lacombe, president of APAC. First of all, I'd like to request a copy of the sign-in sheet for the right-of-way surveying contract. There was an outreach event on the 24th, and I got a lot of calls from small businesses that they didn't know who the primes were, so there's no follow-up. They don't know who to contact. So if you could put that on your website as quickly as possible or send them to us, that would be really great so they can follow up. First of all, secondly, the RFQs, we're really happy to see those RFQs coming out, the reissuance of those. And we hope that, that you take a look at those contracts and the scope of work carefully that can be subcontracted out to small businesses. And basically that's it for today, but we're very happy with some of the things that are moving forward, just improvement on the outreach events. Thank you.
Ms. Lacombe, just before you leave, 2 things. One, I did read your letter. I talked with our CEO about it, and he told me that he'd asked Robert Padilla to reach out to you to talk about this. And also, I just I understand from staff just sent me a text that that what you wanted is posted on the, you said bid.
As long as it's quickly after the
right. Okay. So I think that maybe staff can help navigate where it's posted, but we believe that information that you're requesting is available.
It is on the website?
That's my understanding. Staff is nodding, and so
okay.
I'll ask one of the 3 people who are nodding over there to reach out to you at some point.
Okay, because we need to get that information out to the small businesses.
Mr. Browning, you're
away.
nodding, but I don't think you can help her, so we're not going to have you do that. Okay.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lacombe. All right. Paul Guerrero, followed by Nathan Whipple.
Yeah, just very, very shortly, I wanted to advise you of another tool you can put in your tool belt, and that is, under the new Code of Federal Regulations, you can have small business set-asides. And I know down the line, just way in the future, as you start going through towns and so forth, you're going to have a lot of little contracts going out to move people, to remodel, to do tenant improvement, and to just work with the businesses that you're going to disrupt as you go through town. And those contracts could be set aside for small business. So maybe staff could start looking now and adopting 49 CFR Part 39, and it's Part 26.39, which allows for set-asides for small business. And the only other thing I want to say, in your material that came out today, you list a lot of things that will be completed. And I'm wondering if there's a list of stuff that has been completed, because one of the contingencies to the receipt of federal funds is that you have an environmental justice study. I'm assuming you have, but if you haven't, maybe you should have your staff look at that. Thank you.
We'll look into that. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Mr. Whipple, followed by Mike Wiley. Morning, sir.
Hi. My name is Nathan Whipple. I am an inventor and designer. I am the CEO of Whipple Energy Systems and Technologies, LLC. I have, for the last 4 years, been developing a renewable energy generation system with the California high-speed rail in mind. I've been working with Siemens AG on the development of my designs. I'm at a stage in design where interest in the system determines the outcome of its future development. I am hoping to impress you with my designs. I have made a small handout detailing the system on an individual scale. I believe the system should cater to the needs of the infrastructure it supports, so by scaling the system to an individual array, I hope to allow the California High-Speed Rail Authority to build a system that reflects its needs. I've included in this handout a revenue and cost estimate, as well as 3 illustrations and a corresponding drawing and material index. I believe this system is a viable system for the California high-speed rail because it embodies renewability and land conservation as well. I gave the handout to one of the secretaries. I don't know if you have it in your possession. Okay. All right, I'll wrap that up. I have left my contact information on the last page of the handout. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whipple. We'll take a look at the material you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Wiley, followed by Stacy Mortensen. Morning.
Good morning, Chair Richard, members of the board. I'm Mike Wiley, General Manager of the Sacramento Regional Transit District. I'm here to continue my support. You have in front of you Agenda Item 4 today. We urge your approval to release the RFQ to continue to assess the improvements for the Merced to Sacramento corridor of the service. In that effort, we urge you to continue to work very cooperatively with all of the communities between Merced and Sacramento. We're here to help to move this project forward and to deliver service to Sacramento, future high-speed rail as well as blended service in the interim until we're able to receive full high-speed rail. We've worked cooperatively with your staff. This is certainly consistent with the actions that you've taken previously. We urge your support for Item 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. We appreciate it. Stacy Mortensen, followed by Alan Scott.
Good morning. I am here today representing that 20-agency working group from Merced to Sacramento. It's a group that you have used in the past to vet some ideas, work out some kinks and bugs, and end up with products that go forward with the full support of the communities that you're working with. I urge your support of Item 4. We'd really like to thank Ben and Diana for their work with the stakeholders in advance of today so that we've been able to have input on the item, and would urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, good morning.
Good morning.
Followed by Ross Brown.
Good morning, Mr. Richard and board. My name is Alan Scott. I'm a founding member of Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability from Kings County. My first question is why. Lately, there has been a deluge of information, both in editorials and in engineering documents and expert documents from all the way from the University of Oxford in England to documents written here. So I kind of put something together last night. So my question is why? Why are we still doing this project? You have no money. You have no funding stream. You're in violation of Prop 1A. And then in parentheses, let's agree to disagree. We should know by the 31st of this month, one way or the other, on the first 2 issues of the 8 issues. You have no private funding. The state is broke. For funded and unfunded at a tune of $1.1 trillion. The United States is broke to a tune of $17 trillion. There are too many experts who now clearly state this project is a disaster. and that's supported by Dan Walters' article last Sunday in the Sacramento Bee. And the professor from Oxford University has also stated so that the big contracts with government-run contracts are issues. The comparison was the Bay Bridge to this project. Furthermore, this project is no longer high-speed. When you look at the map of the state and the routing and everything else like that, and you put the blended into the system and everything, you come up with one thing. There's no way you can do it. There's an article by the Reason Group that says that it can't be done. It's somewhere around 6 hours to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles when it's done. The biggest thing is this is no longer a high-speed project. It is a politically driven legacy project that can and never will be high-speed. That can't and never will be high-speed. So my question today is why? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Browning, followed by Ted Hart.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and lady and gentlemen of the board, and the newest board member. Welcome. My name is Ross Brown, and I'd like to speak to you today, address my comments to board agenda item number 7, which is a proposal to adopt a policy and procedure for contingency management, i.e. an overage fee, a built-in overage fee. I would ask the board to seriously consider not adopting this policy in the amounts that I see mentioned in the document here. You're asking your staff, you're giving your staff the ability to approve a contingency fee for an overage on a contract when you're using supposedly the most experienced, in his words, the most experienced contractor on CP1, a contractor that has a documented history of a minimum of 40% on all of his large projects. And it just seems like you're setting this thing up in the middle, right at the beginning, to say, well, we'll just give you 30%. So I would ask the board to seriously consider not voting for this project at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. And let me assure you we're going to have a conversation about this on item 7. We'll address those concerns. Mr. Hart, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and the board. My name's Ted Hart. I'm one of a group of about 20 people in the state who have been following this entire project for the last 3 to 5 years. I have 60 years in the construction industry, and we have many other experts on our side that look at this. We look at it in hope that we might be of some help to the board, because we're independent, we're not owing to anyone, and we're objective in what we're looking at. I know you have a busy agenda, so I'm not going to take up much of your time this morning. A short review of what I would look at right now is speed, safety, and assumption. All of these are controlled by one thing, the 2-hour and 40-minute mandatory requirement for the run from L.A. and to San Francisco. Unfortunately, the previous staff have left you with an impossible combination of circumstances and questionable assumptions. In order to meet this requirement of Prop 1A, it will require running large segments at 220 miles per hour, which is at red line, and I emphasize the red line. No high-speed trains anywhere in the world are operating at sustained speeds of 220 miles per hour. Oh, you may be able to get up a single perfect run in the allotted time, but it will be almost impossible to accomplish this on a day-to-day basis. Your spokesperson, Lisa Marie Alley, says, quote, "We will never be going at 150 to 200 miles per hour in urban areas." Well, how will this work in your time frame? Shifting over to a different subject, you are considering passing this resolution, which would give staff authority to run up to 30% contingencies. Given the size of the project and its rocky history to date, it's premature for the board to remove themselves from their oversight role. These mega projects have a history of large cost overruns, and it's your responsibility to protect the people of California with your oversight and experience. I urge you to retain your power to be able to look at this carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I have one last speaker card. I have not seen any more, and that is from Michael Licola. Good morning, Mr. Licola.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to provide a little clarification on something that's been in the media. There's been a lot of confusion and misstatements about the tragic accident in Spain, the train accident. My firm, Solutions International, we represent some of the largest construction and engineering firms in Spain, and I thought it would be useful to clarify what in fact occurred, particularly as it relates to high-speed rail systems. While most of the media has reported this as a high-speed train accident, it was in fact a train traveling at high speed. It was not a high-speed rail train or operating on high-speed rail infrastructure. The high-speed rail system and infrastructure in Spain, like most places around the world, provides technology that automatically prohibits excessive speed, signaling errors, and conductor errors or illnesses from jeopardizing the safety of the passengers, and also incorporates automated braking. In fact, had that segment of the network been upgraded to as an advanced operating system as the rest of the Spanish high-speed rail network, the accident would never have occurred. The Spanish system is the largest system in the world, with the exception of China, and continues to have a record of no fatalities caused by the infrastructure or operations. So while many in the media are suggesting that this type of accident is one of the risks of high-speed rail, in fact, it is one of the risks of not switching to the highly advanced systems of a high-speed rail network. I hope that you and the board and those in industry here will help educate the media and the public of this distinction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leakley. Okay. Did you want to add something? Okay. Ms. Shank, I understand from Mr. Morales that you had wanted to raise some questions about this last subject that was just placed before us.
Yeah, but I don't think that this might be the appropriate time. Let's get through public comment, and then there ought to be an opportunity
that was the last comment, though.
Oh, that was the last
That was the last public comment.
Oh, it was. Okay.
That's why I was turning to you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, and the speaker emphasized what I wanted to talk about, that this was a traditional train just going very fast rather than our high-speed rail project. But it's, I think, incumbent upon us at the High-Speed Rail Authority and staff to make sure that that gets out, because I suspect that every one of us up here has been approached by elected officials, former elected officials, or just people that we know saying, oh my gosh, look at this, and you're involved with high-speed rail, and what does this mean? We need to do a very good job of telling this story, and we've got to, through our communications folks, frankly, I think we missed the train on that a little bit, and I think we need to go back and still talk about it, because it's still very much a question in many people's minds. And just yesterday spoke with a very high-level government official who is not that conversant with high-speed rail and brought it up. So there's still work to be done on our part, and I think we need to do it aggressively.
Thank you. And I appreciate those comments. I think they're well stated, and I know from conversations that I've had with Mr. Morales and that he's had with staff that, you know, our staff has been actively involved in making sure that we understand what happened there, that any lessons that we should learn from that are learned. But I agree with your comment, and I appreciate the way Mr. Licola stated it, which is that if anything, it shows the risks of not moving to a modernized high-speed rail system. I know that Senator Feinstein, after the Chatsworth crash, the terrible crash in L.A., has been pushing for positive train control, and there's been a lot of resistance to getting that done on the timetable, but we are building a system that has positive train control. So, as you said, these are things that we need to get out to people. Right. Mr. Morales, did you want to add something?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to follow, obviously, the Spanish incident's a tragedy, and it is incumbent on us to learn whatever we can from it. There's some things that are relevant, some that are not, but certainly we are looking at it, have been looking aggressively. We have the ability, as more is learned about it, to understand what happened and how we should apply any lessons to us through direct interactions that we can have with the Spanish government and the Spanish operators, through the UIC, who the Association of Operators, through the Federal Railroad Administration, through the Transportation Research Board here in the U.S. and other mechanisms. We've already done some preliminary looks through our Safety and Security Committee, which I chair, to look at, again, what things may be coming out of this and how they might be relevant. It's already been pointed out, again, this was not contrary to numerous reports, part of their high-speed network, but again, we will look to see what's relevant. Two things that have certainly been discussed in the public arena that I just want to touch on quickly. One is the apparent role that speed played and the fact that the European version of positive train control was not in place at this segment of the system. That is required under federal regulation as of 2015 to be in place here in the U.S. It is part of our designs in the system and will be in place on every element of our system, including the Caltrain corridor. And in fact, that's the first piece of work that they'll be doing on the Caltrain corridors is putting that into place. And then secondly, again, reports about what role cell phone communications may have played in it based on press reports. Federal regs here in the U.S. already prohibit that from happening. As we move forward to operation, we will not only obviously comply with any and all federal regulations, but will ensure that we have operating practices that are at the very highest levels of safety. So again, we will certainly look for what's relevant, what is not, and make sure that we're incorporating everything we can from this or any other example around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Morales. Okay. I think that was very important commentary. We'll move now through the agenda. And Mr. Morales, did we decide how we wanted to handle the three proposals to issue RFQs? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes of the meetings as noted.
Second. All right. Before the Secretary calls the roll, I just want to let Mr. Henning know that it's a matter of routine that I manage to skip over the minutes every month, and so my colleagues always keep me on track for that. Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Mr. Rossi?
Aye.
Ms. Shank?
Aye.
Mr. Henning? Chairman Richard?
Are we doing the minutes now? Yes. Aye. Thank you. All right. Now, Mr. Morales, on items 2, 3, and 4, did we want to handle those as one combined presentation?
Right. Items. Okay. Items 2, 3, 4 are very similar items, and they're follow-ups on previous actions that the board has taken regarding extensions of contract. They're consistent with the policy and direction set by the board previously. So what we would suggest, we can answer any questions on them, provide them a brief update, but if the board desires, you could vote on the 2, 3, 4 here, recognizing they're separate items, vote on them in block. In order to expedite the proceedings on these.
Pleasure of the board members. Can we just proceed that way?
I think so.
All right. So, question.
I'm willing to move all three.
All right.
Second.
They've been moved and seconded. Moved by Mr. Rossi, seconded by Vice Chair Richards. Any other questions on this? The Secretary, please call the roll. And this is for items 2, 3, and 4.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Shank?
Yes.
Mr. Henning?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next is item 5, the proposal to amend the Nossaman contract for legal services. Ms. Green-Ross, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This item, number 5, is a request for delegated authority for the CEO to amend the existing legal service contract with the Nossaman Law Firm for an additional 2 years and an additional $8.6 million. The current amount of $5.9 million is expected to be depleted by the end of this month. That would bring the total amount of the contract to $14.5. As you may not be aware, there are 2 requirements for legal service contracts that the state has. One is that you must seek. Oh, sure.
Yeah, and also what I've noticed is we're getting a lot of echo, so why don't you just speak a little more slowly? I was going to ask all the other speakers to do that because there's something with the AV system here today, but thanks.
Certainly. The 2 requirements that we've met for that the state requires is to seek authorization from the Attorney General's office for the use of outside counsel, and that these contracts are not competitively bid. So this is an amendment to an existing contract, and as you may or may not be aware, Nossaman is providing a tremendous amount of legal support to our program, and this work would continue that work, assuring all necessary state and environmental permits are obtained, legal support in securing our grant and our Prop 1A funds, assistance with the Surface Transportation Board jurisdictional issues, the assistance with the negotiations with the freight railroads, application for and compliance with FRA regulatory requirements, legal assistance in the procurement process for all 5 design-build construction packages for the Central Valley, including the request for qualifications, requests for proposals, contract drafting, and the like. And in this last state budget, we were able to obtain budgetary authority for 2 additional staff counsel positions, and so this would also be training and guidance to help eventually transition in the new counsel to get up to speed and work on the similar issues, and eventually stand in their shoes and do some of this work in-house.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Schenk?
Thank you. A couple of questions. Who reviews the bills as they come in? Is that the AG's office and Mr. Falens, or is it just Mr. Falens?
Mr. Falens, myself, review the contracts. The Attorney General also submits a bill, and we review that bill as well.
Yeah. And is the contract on billable hours, or is it on a project basis, or how do they bill us?
It's a traditional billing. And they do try to categorize it by the task so that it's easily identified what area they worked on.
And do you have some idea of what the average hourly rate is?
Not off the top of my head. I know from other contracts that I've been involved in negotiating, we're often able to get a blended rate where you get the highest partner and the lowest partner because it's a state, and they'll often give us a discount for because it's a state project. But some of the, as you may know from private practice, very experienced competitive law firm billable hours can be $800 an hour. Some can be as low as $350. But we try to negotiate and push for a blended rate.
And you did. I heard the word discount. I like that.
Some
word.
Firms will, you can.
Yeah, I know
some
firms. I'm talking about this contract. Are we getting any kind of a discount on this contract?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can find out for you.
Okay. And, the Nossaman firm is a wonderful firm, and I have nothing but the highest regard. But I would like to broaden my comment, Mr. Chairman, to apply to sort of all legal fees as we incur them. One, I'd like to know what the rates are. I'd like to know if we are getting a discount. I'd like to know how many hours at $800 an hour and how many at, $200. In other words, what are we paying for this and how many hours? And I'd like to suggest that now that we have such a fine audit committee, that on some regular basis, these, like our other bills, be reviewed carefully by the audit committee I'm sure our council does a terrific job, but you get sort of caught up in it, and it's always good to have someone else take a look. You do review the legal bills? Great. Okay. Thank you.
But notwithstanding that the audit committee does review the bills, I think Ms. Schenk's request was that she wanted to get some direct information about the contracts and so forth. So I'd ask staff to provide that
Thank you.
to her and any other member who would like to see it. Mr. Umber. I know we have a number of practicing lawyers on the board, and so I imagine when anybody starts talking about bills, people break out in hives.
Some of us have perfected it. We don't practice anymore.
Right, that's right. No. I hope our blended rate's not $800 an hour. But the recommendation makes reference to some small businesses, subcontracts. Do you know who the subcontracts are?
They're in the middle of being negotiated. With the general counsel and I, we met with one of the firms that Nosman brought to us that would be doing environmental work, but because it's not executed yet, I'm not, able to disclose it yet.
There's not somebody who's already working with them, a subcontract that's already
No. In fact, to find qualifying firms, there's only so many that are listed in the Small Business Register with the Department of General Services. They've got to meet those criteria, and then they've got to be able to qualify to do the work that we need. So they took some effort and time to come up with some firms that could fit easily into this project.
As a just general comment, I know that virtually every one of the contracts that we award has subcontractors, and I think it'd be useful for us to know who those subcontractors are. If there's some sort of threshold, I don't know what that might be, below which we don't know, but anything above a certain threshold, I think it's important for us to know for a variety of reasons. So if we could do that. So, for example, on this contract, when they designate whomever the subcontractors are, if we could know that, that would be good.
Okay. Mr. Morales?
Just on that point, we just wanted to reinforce and make sure the board understood we are applying that small business goal to all of our contracts as we go forward, so we wanted to make sure that was highlighted. I just wanted to underscore a few quick points. One, our primary legal representation is through the Attorney General's office, and in fact, before we go out and secure any help from the private sector, we go through the Attorney General's office and we have to ensure that they cannot offer what we need. And the reason we have this level of outside help is that because of the specialized nature of what we're doing in many cases, that the state just typically doesn't deal with many of the issues that we're having to deal with. It's always on a task order basis. It's not a retainer basis. So, and the chief counsel is the manager of that contract, of these contracts, to direct what sort of assistance we need when we need it. So I just wanted to reinforce those points.
Great. Okay. Mr. Richards.
Just a quick comment, just to make sure for clarification. Is I understand it, Jeff, that this is a task-driven contract, and the number that we're looking at is really a not-to-exceed number, and in fact could be less than that number, but cannot exceed it based upon the tasks that are asked of the contractor, in this instance the law firm. Is that correct?
That is correct. And in fact, the previous trend has been, we have not spent up to the levels authorized.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Spoken as a consumer of legal services as opposed to a provider. Okay.
And I do look at them carefully.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Okay. Motion on this?
Mr. Rosen.
Okay. Yeah, was it Mike who moved it? Yeah. Moved by Mr. Rossi, seconded by Vice Chair Hartnett. Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Mr. Henning?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I can introduce item 6.
All right. Item 6, the RFQ on right-of-way engineering and surveying. I'll ask Mr. Morales to introduce this.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, this is it's really a technical cleanup provision here. The board had previously authorized staff to secure right-of-way and surveying services through an RFP process. As we proceeded with that, we had strong recommendations from the Small Business Advisory Committee and others that if we were to pull out the survey work, that could be very much tailored towards small business participation. So we've done that along with the budget that was authorized by the board previously. Survey work, though, falls under a different code, government code, and is required to be procured on a qualifications basis, not a price basis. So although the board had authorized all of these services through an RFP, we wanted to come back and make sure that there was no question of the authority of the contracting mechanism in order to secure these services. So this is really just reconciling the method of how we're procuring these services with the authority that had previously been recognized. It's not a change in scope of services, not a change in budget, simply the procurement methodology.
So this is just to make sure that we're within the legal parameters for the issuance of this type of contract?
Correct. We didn't want to have any question about the authority to actually secure these services through this method.
Questions of members?
Move adoption of the item as recommended.
All right.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Hartnett, seconded by Vice Chair Richards. Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Aye.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Mr. Henning?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, our last item on the public agenda is the proposal to adopt a policy and procedures for contingency management on construction, design, build, and design, build, operate contracts. Mr. Tapping, good morning.
Mr. Chairman, let me just say, in introduction, John, this is really this is part of our transition, the authority's transition to becoming a construction agency. Other departments have either statutory and/or policy or regulatory guidelines on contingency for construction contracts. Because the authority hasn't issued construction contracts before, we need to establish such a procedure. So that's what this is about, and I'll have John describe it in detail and respond to questions.
And at some point, either in John's presentation or in your follow-up, I do think some of the questions that were raised by members of the public this morning should be addressed by us.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am here to present an agenda item on a proposal for procedures pertaining to the establishment and management of contingencies on construction, design, build, and construction, design, build, operate contracts. As the authority enters into the construction phase of the high-speed rail program, it is appropriate to establish a policy on contingency development and management. Contingency is typically defined as an estimated dollar amount to allow for items, conditions, or events for which the occurrence of effects are uncertain, which experience shows will likely result in the aggregate in additional costs. For public works projects, a project contingency is typically included to cover the cost of work deemed likely to be necessary in order to accomplish the work within scope. It should be noted that at both the program and project level, contingencies are contemplated and provided in current authority estimates and in the current business plan. There are three general...
Yeah, Mr. Russell.
Just so we're clear on that point, our budget and our business plan already has a series of contingencies in it for construction. So what we're now talking about is a policy which will put in place what I would call a more sophisticated process for ascertaining the range of that contingency that will actually be used from the perspective of modeling. And that is, the things that you mentioned in this particular memo deal with that issue. Not that there aren't contingencies, or that whatever contingencies we come through with this policy will be added on to the contingencies we already have, and that you will add the additional dimension of running Monte Carlos, which will then also deal with the probability aspects of these things, which refer to the exercise, as to one of the public mentioned, Freiberg of Oxford's page 29. That's what we're doing here, right?
That's exactly right. There's currently contingency estimates, both at the program and project level. What the risk management program is proposing is to do really a state-of-the-practice analysis in developing a risk-based approach to refining those contingencies. And it's without getting too detailed, we're looking at doing a bottoms-up approach where you identify the potential risks of the project. For example, as we move into CP1, we'd look at the specific risks on that project. And we'd also look at some of Freiberg's research in terms of a reference class and do a tops-down. And so through that process, we develop kind of a risk envelope methodology to focus in on what is an appropriate risk-informed contingency for the project. So there's three general methods that public agencies use in developing contingency amounts. One is just expert judgment based on an assessment made by the project manager and staff, typically small projects with little risk, known uncertainties to some extent, the quantification of that. Agencies that have been in place a long time and have, perfunctory bread and butter type projects have guidelines with a pre-established percentage based on historic fashion. And in the memo, I listed some of those. Again, but we're going beyond that in doing this approach, or the proposed approach. And the last is a risk-based computer simulation, as you mentioned, using a Monte Carlo analysis that includes probable events and impacts resulting from that. And that's really powerful in that it results in a range of expected outcomes, and you can get a confidence level associated with it. So large, complex projects without adequate precedent typically require specific study. And I think as we enter into this program, the risk-based approach is a really prudent mechanism, methodology to proceed with setting a project contingency. The Monte Carlo approach is widely accepted by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the Bureau of State Audits, and Federal Railroad Administration. Our approved risk management plan has incorporated these type of approaches in response to some of their recommendations. Three general advantages of the approach. The overall recommendation is made with reference to a specific project, context, and contractual arrangement. So it takes into account the contractual term sheet of the contract and other things. Transparency. As you generate the Monte Carlo approach, you can see a range of expected outcomes and the individual risks that result from that. So all stakeholders are aware of the risks and uncertainties and how they may contribute to a proposed contingency. And as I said, it establishes a level of confidence in the range of outcomes that you have. So a little bit about managing contingency. We have developed over the course of a year or 6 months extensive checks and controls in terms of construction management. And we have set in place a construction management manual and also a procedure by which we would have a configuration change committee at a very high level within the authority. So we've established internal checks and balances and a process by which we will manage the contingency. So in closing, basically the recommendation here is that the authority adopt a risk-informed approach in determining appropriate levels of contingency. That's number one. Number two, mandate that staff provide to the Audit and Finance Subcommittee for approval a risk-informed contingency assessment report and recommended contingency estimate for every awarded construction package, starting with CP1. And lastly, with respect to managing the contingency, authorize the CEO to manage the Audit and Finance Committee's approved contract contingency balance with required reporting to the Audit and Finance Committee at regular meetings or upon request, and for the Audit and Finance Committee to provide reoccurring notification to the board on trending information regarding contingency. With respect, that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Questions from Mr. Tapping? I have a comment at the end, but questions from members? Mr. Rossi.
A couple of questions.
Mike, did you hit your microphone?
If you look at the last page, the last unnumbered page, where the recommendation is, John?
Yes, I'm there.
The resolution?
The recommendation.
Oh, the recommendation, right.
Is that when you talk about this, you know, one of the interesting things here is that as you do this more sophisticated analysis, it is certainly conceivable that you would come up with a number higher than the one that we built into the plan. It would seem to me if that occurs, that has to come back to this board. That can't go to the Audit and Finance Committee, number one. I think it's unlikely given the contingencies we built in, but if that does occur, I think it has to come back to this board. The second thing is that as I look at number 2, in order for the Audit and Finance Committee to approve that, we would have to have all of the data, right? All of the charts, all of the Monte Carlo simulations, all of that. And in a timely fashion. Okay. And then as you move through time, you need to have all of those rerun to be sure that as things change that we're staying on top of that, right?
Absolutely. I think certainly the report that we will provide to the Audit and Finance Subcommittee will be detailed. It will have details about probability and impacts of all of the uncertainties and the results that are generated from that. And also, it is the risk management plan provides for a cyclic process. For example, if we are into the CP1 contract and we've identified a risk with an uncertainty and we perform some mitigations, but we still may have to draw from the contingency, there would be, the risk register changes. Something goes from a risk to an allocated cost or an incurred cost. And so, yes, that is a quarterly process that we would go through.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just asking Mr. Morales if we could clarify in terms of the overall contingency level, where is that going to be set and how is that going to be set?
This follows on some of the questions and points Mr. Rossi made. We have, within the overall programmatic estimate that was in the business plan for the project, we have contingencies applied to each element of the construction broken down by segment. That was reviewed by the GAO, among others, for consistency with best practice and reasonableness. Those contingencies are just a percentage basis, though, based on industry history and trends, what level of contingency should be applied at what stage of project development. There are different levels assigned for different things. The overall contingency in the cost estimate, and I would defer to Mr. Rossi, who retains numbers better than I do, but I believe it's 18 to 22% is the overall number within the $68 billion number. What this does now...
Within that number, not on top of that.
It is within that number,
right.
yes, right. The contingency is part of that number. Right. What we are doing now is asking the board to, now we take it down to the application of that contingency on a contract-specific basis as we go forward with each construction contract. And it's a much more precise way of determining what the risks are and what the contingency, therefore, should be on each one of those contracts. And so we will move from what was a percentage-based approach to now a risk-based approach through a Monte Carlo simulation of looking at specific components within the contract and determining what the risks of those factors coming into play are and what the value of that is. Very important to note a few things. One, this contingency, and again, this is the same for all agencies who do construction projects. It's controlled by the authority, not by a given contractor. So the contingency can only be used when by the authority upon, and in our cases, based on what we're proposing, based on the review and approval of the Finance and Audit Committee and with reporting to the full board when we do that. So there's ongoing oversight by the board of that. And it is for typically the types of things that we would look at in contingencies are third-party factors that, or external factors that could not be anticipated in a contract prior to its execution or develop over the course of it. It is not the contractor coming in and saying, hey, we missed something. It is things like soil conditions, for instance, if they were not available to the bidder at the time and we find that we have differing soil conditions that require different activities, that would fall under a contingency.
Right. Or the other example that I think of is utility relocation, where maps have not been updated and they open up the trench and find that there's not just cable, but that there's a gas pipeline over there, something like that. Yeah, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Jeff. I think your explanation and your clarification, Mr. Chairman, are appropriate. So the important thing to ensure and understand is that this is all within the budget that we have defined in the 2012 business plan. This, in the private sector, we would call the owner's contingency. This is separate from a contractor's contingency. I'm sure within the number that has been bid in CP1, they've got construction contingency totally separate to this. Right. But this really does involve those things which will potentially have not been able to have been defined at the outset, and gives us what I believe strongly is a far more progressive way of identifying and managing contingency than using a traditional percentage that is often done on projects of far less scope and complexity than what we're dealing with here. So I strongly support the concept, and as discussed by Director Rossi and both you and the Chair, that this is both appropriate and in the best interests of the taxpayers in California.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one other point to reemphasize. I think, again, we're having this discussion. It's an important one, and we have to get approval for this because, again, we have not had construction contracts before. Every other agency that does construction has long-established policies, procedures, rules, and in some cases even laws specifically providing what contingencies are, and the memo provided some examples of that. Caltrans, for instance, and the Transportation Commission have 75 years of practice established that are just applied as a matter of routine to every contract as they go forward. This would set that same sort of policy in place for this board, for this authority, so that we can manage the construction program as we go forward. It is not, so it really has nothing to do with any particular contract, and as far as the need for it, it's a policy and procedure.
So I was just going to make 3 points, and segueing off of your last point, because this is a project that is under intense public scrutiny, as it should be. for a project of this magnitude. And so I know, especially as was reflected in some of the comments from members of the public, and those particular members of the public pay great attention to this project, and so they raise questions about it. But let's just talk briefly about what this is not. This is not, as our CEO just said, related to any specific contract, nor does it indicate that somehow we believe that the contracted for amounts in that contract are not going to be the ones that we're going to be managing to. We certainly do believe that. But there are certain things that are inherent in the contracting process where people make guesses as to things that can't be known until you actually get in there. So a contingency is a standard practice, and it's prudent, and we're developing this as a generic model. That's point number one. Point number two, as has been emphasized by Mr. Rossi and Mr. Tapping, this is a very sophisticated approach. This is not a simple setting aside of a percentage and operating with a hope and a prayer. But it's an extension of very sophisticated risk management tools that we are applying to this project. And we're pleased to have Mr. Tapping, who has demonstrated that he has tremendous skills and capabilities in this area. So we're taking a very sophisticated approach to risk management in general and bringing that to this question of what the appropriate contingency levels are. And the third point that came up, which was an appropriate point to be raised, was the question of whether or not this constituted some type of hands-off delegation to the staff. And the way that this memo is written and the way that the resolution is structured, in fact, board governance attaches to this process and remains attached to it in, I think, a very appropriate way. We do have a Finance and Audit Committee. This requires that the Finance and Audit Committee be fully informed about any applications of the contingency. And one of the things that I talked to the CEO about was I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just the Finance and Audit Committee, because every member of this board, as we move into the construction phase, I believe has a duty to make sure that we are watching and looking for any trends that would lead to any sense of problems in terms of cost growth on this. And so therefore we've structured this to ask the Finance and Audit Committee to keep the board completely apprised, and also, just as the CEO and I have discussed, anything that looks like a trend that's moving in the wrong direction, there'd be an immediate notification to the board. So it's customary, except that it's more sophisticated, and we maintain I think a very appropriate level of board governance over this issue, and I think those are points I wanted to make. And I'll just add one other postscript. A lot of us up here have served on various boards and commissions in our life. Ms. Shank was on the Port Commission in San Diego. I've been on the BART board. Mr. Hartnett's been on the Peninsula JPB and so forth. I have to say that we're fortunate that while every member of this board brings things to the board, in this case, we have people with deep business experience. Mr. Rossi served as Chief Risk Officer of Bank of America and was in charge of running the kind of sophisticated, when you hear us talking about Monte Carlo models, it's not that we're taking your money and going off to put it on a roulette wheel. A Monte Carlo model is a very sophisticated system of massive multiple simulations of different scenarios to try to help one understand what potential outcomes could be. And Mr. Rossi ran those models at B of A. And Vice Chair Richards, having worked as a developer, has had to deal with practical issues on the ground of building things with contingencies and so forth. So we're fortunate, and I think the public's fortunate, that we have those kind of capabilities on this board at this point. So with that, I just wanted to emphasize those points, because this is, going back to something Ms. Shank raised earlier this morning, this is an item that's easily misunderstood, and it's very important for people to understand it correctly. Vice Chair Hartnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 3 points. First, I'm very glad we're doing this. Second, it is also important to note that in our construction package, construction contract, in the design build contracts, there is an allocation of risks by contract. And so in a general sense, the contractor is allocated more risks than otherwise in the design build scenario. but there's a clear dividing line of allocation of risk, and I think that's another benefit to us in our overall scenario. Lastly, on the board governance issue, I think everything that Mr. Rossi and you have said, Chair, about the governance is really important to highlight. In my experience, having sat on probably more than 10 boards, that the governance model we're using to monitor the risk and even in the adoption of the risk policy is extraordinary. And so, I think it's right that it be extraordinary in our circumstance, but I think it is extraordinary, and I think it's important that we do it, and that we keep doing it even as years down the line, as board membership changes and people's experience, people with different experience changes. It's really important that we keep this governance structure in place, so that whoever is sitting here, whatever board members, have the benefit of the same process and structure. And so this isn't the here today, gone tomorrow thing. This is, I think, for the life of the authority, as long as we're in the construction business. And we'll have something as we're operating trains as well.
Thank you. Okay, with that, if there are no further questions, I'll ask for a motion on this item.
Move for approval.
Okay, it's been moved by Vice Chair Richards and seconded by Ms. Schenk. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Aye.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Mr. Henning?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Thank you. Thank the staff for that presentation. And I thank the public members who raised these questions. They're very important questions. I'm glad we had an opportunity to delve into this in the discussion. With that, that completes the public portion of the agenda. The board will now enter into closed session to discuss matters of litigation, and we will report back on any actions after that. Thank you. We'll be back in public session, and the board has completed its closed session with nothing to report. Thank you very much. With that, this meeting of the High Speed Rail Authority is adjourned.